Nina Covington Hoffman stared at the man across the candlelit table and tried very hard not to throw up. Jerome Mitchell, Charles's trusted assistant, the man who had smiled at her for weeks like a concerned friend, was leaning forward with hunger in his eyes. But it wasn't the kind of hunger that made a woman feel desired. It was the kind that made her feel like prey. "Think about it, Nina," he said smoothly, his hand sliding across the table to cover hers. "Charles is never going to recover. He's going to spend the rest of his life playing with blocks and chasing butterflies. Is that really what you want? To be a nursemaid until you're old and gray?" Nina forced herself not to flinch, forced her face into an expression of conflicted interest. "What exactly are you suggesting?" she asked. Jerome's smile widened. "I'm suggesting that accidents happen," he said softly. "And when they do, the grieving widow inherits everything. You're beautiful, Nina, smart. You deserve a real man, not a child trapped in a man's body." Nina's heart pounded against her ribs. In her pocket, her phone was recording every word. "And if I were interested in making an accident happen," she said carefully, "what would be in it for me?" Jerome's eyes gleamed with triumph. He had no idea he was walking straight into a trap. But before we get to how Nina took down the man who tried to destroy her husband, we need to go back to where we stopped in part 1, back to the moment Charles confesses he was falling for Nina. Make sure you're subscribed and that notification bell is on. Because this finale, it's going to be everything. They sat in Mrs. Patterson's living room for a long time after that. Not talking at first, just existing in the same space while Nina processed everything. Her father's death, Charles's deception, the confession that still echoed in her ears. "The way I'm falling for you." She wasn't ready to say it back, wasn't even sure what she felt anymore. But she knew one thing. She wasn't angry. Hurt, yes. Confused, absolutely. But there was something about the way Charles had opened up to her, the vulnerability in his eyes, the hesitation in his voice, that made it impossible to hate him. He had lied to protect himself. She understood that. She had spent her whole life building walls for the same reason. "So what happens now?" she asked finally. Charles looked at her carefully. "That depends on you." "What do you mean?" "I deceived you. I know that. And if you want to leave, if you want to end this marriage right now, I won't stop you." His jaw tightened. "But I'm asking you to stay. Not for my grandmother. Not for appearances. For us. Because I think there's something here worth fighting for." Nina thought about her options. She could leave, walk away from this insane situation and never look back. But where would she go? Back to the Langston mansion, where her mother would gloat about her failure? Back to being invisible, overlooked, disposable? Or she could stay. Stay with a man who had lied to her, yes, but who had also held her while she grieved. Who had driven 2 hours just to be there when she found out her father was dead. Who looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing he had ever seen. "I need time," she said finally, "to process all of this. To figure out how I feel. Take all the time you need. And I need complete honesty from now on. No more masks, no more performances. If we're doing this, whatever this is, I need to know I'm dealing with the real you." "No more lies," he agreed. "I promise." She studied his face, the real face, the one without the goofy grin or exaggerated expressions. He was even more handsome like this, she realized. Sharp and intense and focused. "Okay," she said. "I'll stay." Relief flooded his features. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I'm still mad at you." "Fair enough." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "How can I make it up to you?" Nina considered. "You can start by telling me everything. The accident. Who you suspect. What you're planning to do about it. That could be dangerous for you to know." "I don't care." She met his eyes squarely. "If I'm staying in this marriage, I'm staying all the way. I want to know what I'm dealing with." Charles looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right," he said. "I'll tell you everything." Over the next few hours, Charles told her the truth. About the accident, The sliced brake lines, the suspicious SUV that had forced him off the road, the way it all felt too coordinated to be random. About his security team's investigation. About the list of suspects that included board members, business rivals, and even a few people within his own household staff. About Jerome Mitchell, his personal assistant, who had been acting strangely in recent weeks, taking private calls, asking questions about Charles's schedule, showing a little too much interest in Nina. "You think Jerome is behind it?" Nina asked. "I think Jerome is involved somehow," Charles said. "Whether he's the mastermind or just a pawn, I don't know yet, but I'm watching him." "Has he done anything suspicious with me?" Charles's expression darkened. "He's been attentive, making comments about how hard your life must be, married to someone like me, suggesting you deserve better. Sounds like he's trying to turn me against you." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of." Charles leaned forward. "Listen to me, Nina. Until I figure out who's behind this, I need you to be careful around Jerome. Don't trust him. Don't be alone with him. And if he says anything at all, that seems like he's fishing for information, tell me immediately." Nina nodded. "I will. And there's something else." He hesitated. "My grandmother doesn't know I'm faking. She genuinely believes I'm impaired." "You've been lying to her too?" "I had to. If I told her the truth, she'd act differently around me. People would notice. Whoever is trying to kill me would realize my condition is fake, and I'd lose the only advantage I have." Nina thought about Grandma Evelyn. The way she looked at Charles with such tender concern. The hope in her voice when she talked about his recovery. "She's going to be so hurt when she finds out," Nina said softly. "I know." His voice was heavy. "But I'd rather have her hurt and alive than kept in the dark while I end up dead." That night, back at the Hoffman mansion, something had shifted. When Nina climbed into bed with her sketchbook, Charles didn't put on a silly voice or pretend to be fascinated by the bedspread pattern. He just sat beside her, reading through business reports he'd been secretly catching up on for weeks. "This is weird," Nina said after a while. He looked up. "What is?" "This, you, being normal." She gestured vaguely. "I got used to dinosaur pajamas and bedtime stories." A smile tugged at his mouth. "I could still do that if you want. The dinosaur pajamas are actually comfortable." "I'll pass." He chuckled, a real chuckle, low and warm, and returned to his reports. Nina tried to focus on her sketching, but her eyes kept drifting to him. The king-sized bed suddenly felt much smaller even with all the space between them. The Charles she had known for a month was fun and sweet and exhausting. But this Charles, the real one, was something else entirely. He was brilliant. She could see it in the way he processed information, the notes he made in the margins, the occasional muttered comment about market strategies she didn't understand. He was intense. Every movement deliberate, every glance weighted with meaning. And he was looking at her like she was something precious, something worth protecting. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "So are you." His eyes met hers, and the air between them crackled. "I'm trying to figure you out," he admitted. "A month of watching you, and I still feel like I'm barely scratching the surface." "That's because you were too busy eating fake boogers to have real conversations." He winced. "I'm never going to live that down, am I?" "Absolutely not." A beat of silence. Then they both laughed. It felt different now. Real. Like the beginning of something neither of them had expected. "Charles?" Nina said. "Yeah? I'm glad you're not actually an idiot." He grinned. A real, unguarded grin that made her heart stutter. "I'm glad you didn't run away." She turned back to her sketch, trying to hide the warmth blooming in her chest. This was dangerous. Falling for him was dangerous. But as she glanced at Charles one more time, his profile sharp in the lamplight, his presence steady and solid beside her, she realized she didn't care. She was already falling. And maybe, just maybe, that wasn't such a bad thing. 2 weeks had passed since Charles dropped his mask. 2 weeks of real conversations, real laughter, real moments that made Nina's heart do things she wasn't prepared to analyze. Without the childish act, Charles was different, intense, focused. the kind of man who commanded attention simply by existing in a room. He still made her laugh. His humor was dry and sharp, nothing like the goofy persona he'd worn before. He still surprised her with thoughtful gifts. He still looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered. But now there was heat behind those looks, and Nina was finding it increasingly difficult to ignore. One evening, she was curled up in the armchair by the bedroom window, working on a new painting. The easel Charles had bought her was positioned to catch the last golden light of sunset, and she was lost in the work, mixing colors, layering shadows, trying to capture something she couldn't quite name. "Is that me?" She jumped. Charles had appeared behind her silently, a habit she still hadn't gotten used to. "Don't sneak up on people," she muttered, heart racing. "Sorry." He didn't sound sorry at all. He was too busy staring at the canvas. "That's definitely me." It was. She had painted him from memory, the way he looked when he was deep in thought, staring out the window at the Chicago skyline. Profile sharp, jaw set, eyes distant and calculating. The real Charles, not the mask. "It's just practice," she said quickly. "You say that about everything you create." He moved closer, studying the details. "The way you've captured the light on my skin, the tension in my shoulders. It's like you see things other people miss. That's kind of the point of being an artist." "No, it's more than that." He turned to look at her, and his gaze was intense enough to make her breath catch. "You see me, the real me, even when I was trying to hide." Nina's mouth went dry. "Charles, I want you to paint me properly," he said. "What?" "A full portrait, not from memory, from life." His eyes held hers. "I want to see what you see when you look at me." The request was simple enough. Artists painted portraits all the time, but the way he was looking at her made it feel like something else entirely. "Okay," she heard herself say. "When?" "Now." They set up in the bedroom, where the light was best. Nina positioned her easel near the window. Charles sat in the armchair across from her, relaxed but alert, like a lion pretending to rest. "How do you want me?" he asked. The question sent heat flooding through her body. "Just natural," she managed. "Comfortable. Don't pose." He raised an eyebrow. "You want me to just sit here?" "I want you to be yourself." Something flickered in his expression. "That might be harder than you think. Try." For a while, there was only the sound of her brush against canvas and the soft tick of the clock on the mantel. Charles was true to his word. He didn't pose, just sat and watched her work with those intense dark eyes. It was unnerving, having his full attention while she tried to concentrate. "You keep hiding behind your hair," he said suddenly. Nina's brush faltered. "What?" "Your bangs. You always pull them forward, like you're trying to disappear behind them." Self-consciousness flooded her. Her hand automatically went to her forehead, tugging the hair lower. "It's just a habit," she said. "It's more than that." Charles leaned forward slightly. "Someone made you feel like you needed to hide. Who was it?" Nina's throat tightened. She didn't want to talk about this. Didn't want to dredge up old wounds while she was trying to create something beautiful. But Charles was looking at her with such genuine concern that the words spilled out before she could stop them. "My mother," she said quietly. "She used to make comments. Such a big forehead on such a small face. No wonder you hide behind your hair." Little things, over and over, until I believed them. Charles was silent for a moment. Then he stood up and crossed the room to her. "Charles, I'm trying to paint." "Stop for a second." He reached out and gently, so gently, brushed her bangs away from her forehead. Nina froze. "Look at me," he said. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "Your forehead is beautiful," he said firmly. "Every part of you is beautiful. And your mother was a bitter, jealous woman who tore you down because she couldn't stand how bright you shine." Nina's eyes burned with unexpected tears. "You don't have to. I'm not saying it to be nice." His thumb traced her hairline, feather light. "I'm saying it because it's true. You are the most captivating woman I have ever met. And I need you to see yourself the way I see you." A tear slipped down her cheek. Charles caught it with his thumb. "Can I show you something?" he asked softly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He took her hand and led her to the full-length mirror in the corner of the room, positioned her in front of it, stood behind her, his hands warm on her shoulders. "Look," he said. Nina looked. She saw herself, gray eyes red-rimmed from crying, hair mussed, wearing a paint-stained shirt that had seen better days. "I see a mess," she whispered. "I see a warrior." His voice was low, intense. "I see a woman who survived 20 years of being told she was worthless and came out the other side with her kindness intact. I see an artist with more talent in her little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. I see someone who could have turned bitter and cruel, but chose compassion instead." His hand slid from her shoulders down her arms, leaving trails of warmth. "I see the woman I'm falling in love with," he said. "And she's perfect." Nina's breath caught. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Charles, you don't have to say it back." His voice was rough. "I just needed you to know." "What if I want to say it back?" Something blazed in his eyes. "Do you?" Nina's heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. Everything in her life had taught her to be careful, to guard herself, to never let anyone close enough to hurt her. But Charles had already gotten past every wall she'd built, and she was tired of being afraid. "Yes," she whispered. "I'm falling for you, too." Charles made a sound, half relief, half hunger, and then his mouth was on hers. The kiss was everything and nothing like she'd expected. Gentle at first, questioning, then deeper as she responded, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He kissed her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. She kissed him back like she'd been waiting her whole life for exactly this. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Charles pressed his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Why didn't you?" "Because I was lying to you, and you deserved better than a first kiss built on deception." Nina's heart clenched. "And now?" He pulled back slightly, looking at her with those intense dark eyes. "Now I'm going to spend every day proving I'm worthy of you," he said. Nina laughed, a real full laugh that seemed to surprise both of them. "You're ridiculous," she said. "I'm in love," he corrected, nuzzling the side of her face, sending pleasant tingles down her spine. Which is basically the same thing. And somehow, impossibly, Nina believed him. She wrapped her arms around his neck, heat filling her face over what she was about to say next. But they were husband and wife, weren't they? She had every right to say, "Then show me. Show me how much you love me." His response was low and husky. "As you wish, my queen." And suddenly Nina found herself lifted up into his arms like she weighed nothing. Everything else was like a dream, the kind Nina never wanted to wake up from. Y'all, they finally kissed. If you're cheering at your screen right now, drop a comment saying, "About time." And hit that like button because we're about to shift gears into some serious drama. The villain is making his move, and Nina is about to show everyone what she's really made of. The happiness lasted exactly 11 days. 11 perfect days of stolen kisses, late-night conversations, and learning each other's minds and bodies without masks or pretense. And then Jerome made his move. It started subtly. A comment here. A concerned look there. He was Charles's most trusted assistant, always around, always helpful, always watching. Nina had been cautious around him since Charles's warning. But Jerome was smart. He never said anything overtly suspicious, just little seeds of doubt planted with a sympathetic smile. "It must be so hard for you," he said one afternoon, finding her alone in the library. "Being married to someone who needs so much care." "I manage," Nina said carefully. "But surely you must think about your future." He leaned against the doorframe, blocking her exit. "What happens when Mrs. Hoffman passes? Charles isn't capable of running the company. Everything could fall apart." "That's not really my concern." "Isn't it?" His eyes swept over her. "You're his wife. Whatever happens to Hoffman Global happens to you." Nina said nothing. Jerome's expression shifted, becoming more intense, more predatory. "Have dinner with me," he said. "Tomorrow night. There's something I want to discuss with you. Something that could change your entire life." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but Charles's voice echoed in her mind. "If he says anything that seems like he's fishing for information, tell me immediately." This was her chance to find out exactly what Jerome was planning. "Okay," she said. "Tomorrow night." That evening, she told Charles everything. His reaction was immediate and terrifying. The warmth in his eyes turned to ice. His jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "Absolutely not," he said flatly. "You're not going anywhere near him." "Charles, he's dangerous, Nina. If he's the one behind the accident, if he's been planning to kill me this whole time, then this is our chance to prove it." She grabbed his hands, forcing him to look at her. "Think about it. He's getting sloppy. He thinks you're harmless and I'm corruptible. If I play along, if I get him to admit what he's planning on record, and if something goes wrong, if he realizes you're setting him up, then I'll have security nearby. Your people can watch the whole thing." She squeezed his hands. "Charles, I can do this. Let me help you." He stared at her for a long moment, conflict warring across his face. "I can't lose you," he said finally. "Not now. Not when I just found you." "You won't." She reached up and cupped his face in her hands. "I'm tougher than I look, and I'm not going to let the man who tried to kill my husband get away with it." Charles closed his eyes, took a shaky breath. "If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you get out immediately," he said. "Promise me." "I promise." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "I love you," he murmured against her hair. "I know we haven't said it properly yet. I know it's fast. But I love you, Nina. And the thought of you in danger." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Which is exactly why I'm going to nail this guy to the wall." The restaurant Jerome chose was upscale and intimate. Private booths with velvet curtains, low lighting, the kind of place designed for secrets. Nina wore a wire under her silk dress. Charles's security team was positioned at strategic points throughout the restaurant. Everything was in place. All she had to do was get Jerome to incriminate himself. He was already there when she arrived, nursing a glass of expensive whiskey. "Nina?" He stood, pulling out her chair. "You look stunning." "Thank you." She sat, letting him push in her chair, playing the part. The first hour was a dance. Jerome asked careful questions about her marriage, about Charles's condition, about how she was coping. Nina gave vague, slightly discontent answers, enough to keep him interested without committing to anything. And then, over dessert, he made his move. "I'm going to be direct with you," he said, leaning forward, "because I think you're smart enough to understand what I'm offering." "I'm listening." "Charles is never going to recover. You know that. I know that. And when his grandmother dies, which will be soon given her health, everything changes." Nina's stomach turned, but she kept her expression neutral. "Changes how?" "The board has been concerned about succession," Jerome said carefully. "A mentally impaired CEO isn't exactly inspiring confidence. There are people, powerful people, who would prefer a different outcome." "What kind of outcome?" Jerome's smile was cold. "Accidents happen, Nina. Charles had one accident already. No one would be surprised if he had another. And when he does..." He reached across the table and took her hand. "The grieving widow inherits everything. With the right guidance, my guidance, you could have more money and power than you ever dreamed." Nina's heart was pounding, but she forced herself to lean in, to look interested. "And what would you get out of it?" "A partnership." His thumb stroked across her knuckles. "In every sense of the word, you're wasted on Charles, Nina. You deserve someone who can appreciate you properly, someone who can give you the life you deserve. You're asking me to kill my husband. I'm asking you to free yourself." His eyes glittered. "And to be very, very well compensated for it." Nina pretended to consider, pulled her hand back slowly, like she was conflicted rather than disgusted. If I were interested, she said carefully, how would it work? And what would my cut be if I succeed in making this accident happen? Like you're asking? Jerome smiled triumphantly. 70-30 split. My favor, of course. I'm taking on more risk, but 30% of the Hoffman fortune would set you up for life. He leaned back, supremely confident. The method is simple. Charles takes medication for his condition. An accidental overdose would be tragic but believable. I can provide what you'd need. All you have to do is administer it and play the devastated widow. Nina's blood ran cold. He had planned this down to the last detail. And you've done this before? She asked. The car accident. Was that you? For a moment, Jerome's mask slipped. Pride flickered across his features. The breaks were just the beginning, he said. I underestimated how hard that man is to kill. But with you on the inside, working with me, he shrugged. This time, we won't fail. Got him. Nina had everything she needed. I need time to think, she said, standing. This is a lot to process. Of course. Jerome stood too, moving closer than necessary. But don't take too long, Nina. Opportunities like this don't wait forever. He leaned in like he was going to kiss her. Nina stepped back. I'll be in touch, she said, and walked out without looking back. If you're ready to see Jerome get exactly what he deserves, type, take him down, in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed because the trap is about to snap shut. Back at the mansion, Nina handed over the recording. Charles listened to the whole thing without speaking. His face was a mask of cold fury. He's been with me for 6 years, he said finally. I trusted him. I gave him access to everything. I'm sorry, Nina said softly. Don't be. He looked at her with fierce pride. You got him. You got the confession. Now we end this. Together they planned the final move. The next morning, Nina called Jerome. I've thought about it, she said, making her voice shake with convincing fear. I'm in, but I need you here tonight. Something went wrong. I gave Charles the pills like you said, but he's not breathing and I don't know what to do. There's so much blood. Jerome, I think I killed him. Jerome's response was immediate and eager. Stay calm. Don't touch anything. I'm on my way. We'll make this look like an accident. Hurry, Nina sobbed. Please hurry. She hung up and turned to Charles, who was lying perfectly still on the bed, eyes closed. You're terrifying, you know that? He murmured. Shush. You're dead. Right, sorry. Nina took a video of Charles's body, motionless, pale in the dim lighting, convincing enough to seal Jerome's fate. Then she waited. 20 minutes later, Jerome's car pulled up to the mansion gate. He was barely out of the vehicle when security surrounded him. What the? Let go of me. He struggled against the guards holding his arms. I'm here to help. Nina called me. There's been an accident. Has there? Charles stepped out of the front door, very much alive. Jerome's face went white. Surprise, Charles said coldly. You know, for someone who's been planning my death for months, you really should have done more research on my wife. Charles, this is a misunderstanding. Is it? Charles held up a phone. Jerome's own voice played back clearly. The breaks were just the beginning. I underestimated how hard that man is to kill, but with you on the inside, working with me, this time we won't fail. Jerome's face contorted with rage. You little... He lunged toward Nina, but the guards held him fast. You set me up, you manipulative... I believe the word you're looking for is wife, Nina said sweetly. And you really shouldn't have underestimated me. Get him out of my sight, Charles said. The police are on their way. Let them deal with him. As Jerome was dragged away, still screaming threats and obscenities, Charles turned to Nina. That was incredibly satisfying, he said. I aim to please. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly. My warrior, he murmured against her lips. My brilliant, brave, terrifying wife. Flattery will get you everywhere, Mr. Hoffman. I'm counting on it. The story broke within hours. Hoffman CEO survives assassination plot. Trusted assistant arrested for attempted murder. The headlines were everywhere. News vans parked outside the mansion gates. Reporters clamored for statements. And Charles Hoffman, perfectly healthy, sharp-minded, very much not mentally impaired, held a press conference that sent shockwaves through Chicago's elite. For the past 2 months, I have been pretending to suffer from cognitive impairment, he announced to a stunned crowd of journalists. This deception was necessary to flush out the individual responsible for the attempt on my life. With the help of my wife, Nina Hoffman, we have succeeded. He looked directly into the cameras. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks they can manipulate or harm my family. We are not weak. We are not vulnerable. And we will always, always protect our own. Beside him, Nina stood tall, her gray eyes steady. She wasn't hiding behind her bangs anymore. 1 week later, Charles threw a celebration, an official announcement of his full recovery, a public declaration of his love for his wife. A chance for Chicago's elite to see the real Charles Hoffman in all his glory. The ballroom was packed with dignitaries, business moguls, and socialites, everyone who was anyone in the city. And among them, freshly arrived and overdressed, were the Langstons, Franklin, Denise, and Madeline, wearing a gown that was far too elaborate for someone who hadn't been invited. Nina spotted them across the room and felt her stomach clench. Charles followed her gaze. His expression hardened. "I'll handle this," he said quietly. "Charles, trust me." He crossed the ballroom floor, and the crowd parted for him like water before a ship's prow. The Langstons saw him coming. Madeline immediately brightened, smoothing her dress and arranging her features into what she probably thought was an alluring smile. "Charles," she cooed, stepping forward. "I'm so relieved you've recovered. When I heard about everything you went through, I was devastated. Just devastated." "Were you?" Charles's voice was ice. "Of course. I've been worried sick." She placed a hand on his arm, proprietary and presumptuous. "You know, this whole terrible situation could have been avoided if you'd just married the right woman in the first place. Your real intended bride." The room had gone quiet. Everyone was watching. "The right woman," Charles repeated. "You mean you?" "Obviously." Madeline laughed like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Nina was always just a placeholder, a temporary solution. But now that you're better, we can set things right. Our family's intended for me to marry a Langston daughter," Charles interrupted. "And I did. I married Nina." Madeline's smile faltered. "Yes, but nothing." Charles's voice carried across the silent ballroom. "You refused to marry me because you thought I was damaged. You looked at me and saw a burden instead of a person. You ran away the moment things got difficult. I was concerned for my future. You were selfish." He removed her hand from his arm like it was something contaminating. "And the truly pathetic part is that you're only here now because you found out I was faking. You don't want me, Madeline. You want what I represent. Money, power, status." Madeline's face reddened with humiliation. Charles turned his gaze to Franklin and Denise. "As for you two, the business relationship between Hoffman Global and Langston Industries is terminated effective immediately. I don't do business with people who treat their children like commodities to be traded." Franklin sputtered. "Now wait just a minute. This isn't a negotiation." Charles's tone left no room for argument. "You used your own daughters as bargaining chips. You forced Nina into this marriage through manipulation and threats. The only reason I'm not having you escorted out by security is because my wife asked me to show restraint." His eyes swept across all three of them with undisguised contempt. "Leave, now. And if you contact me or my wife again, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly what kind of people you really are." The Langstons stood frozen, humiliated in front of everyone who mattered. Then, slowly, they retreated toward the exit. But Denise stopped. She turned back, her eyes finding Nina in the crowd. Something ugly twisted her features. "You think you've won?" she spat. "You think you're so much better than us now?" Nina stepped forward, chin high. "I don't think anything, Mother. I know." "Do you? Does your precious husband know the truth about you?" Denise's voice rose loud enough for everyone to hear. "Does he know that you only married him because I promised you information about your father? That you agreed to stay for exactly 3 months, Just long enough to get what you wanted and walk away? The room went silent. Charles went very, very still. Does he know, Denise continued viciously, that you negotiated half of Madeline's inheritance as payment for being his wife? That this was all a business transaction for you too? You're no different from any of us, Nina. You're just better at pretending. Nina felt the blood drain from her face. She looked at Charles. His expression was unreadable. Closed off. The warmth that had been in his eyes for weeks was gone, replaced by something cold and distant. Is that true? He asked quietly. Charles, let me explain. Is it true? Nina swallowed hard. She could lie, could try to spin it, minimize it, make excuses, but they had promised each other no more lies. Yes, she said. It's true. Originally, I agreed to marry you because my mother promised me information about my father if I stayed for 3 months. And I asked for money. Money so I could finally pursue my art without begging anyone for help. Charles said nothing. His jaw was tight. But that was before, Nina continued, her voice strengthening. Before I knew you. Before I saw who you really were. Before you what? His voice was harsh. Before you realized you could get more by staying? Before you calculated that being a Hoffman wife was a better long-term investment? No. Nina stepped closer, forcing him to look at her. Before I fell in love with you. The words rang out across the silent ballroom. Yes, I came into this marriage for selfish reasons, Nina said. I won't deny that. I was desperate and lonely and willing to do almost anything to find my father and escape my family. But somewhere along the way, everything changed. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. You changed me, Charles. The way you looked at me. The way you saw me when no one else did. The way you held me when I fell apart over my father. The way you pushed me to see my own worth. She reached out and took his hand. He didn't pull away. I could have left after my 3 months were up, she said. I could have taken my money and my information and walked away. But I didn't.